Welcome, welcome. It's Mickey Graglia, and I'm probably butchering that, Michele. So excuse my lack of Italian pronunciation. I've got a little bit of French, a little bit of Pig Latin, but that's about it. So welcome. We're so happy to have you on the Empowered Team podcast. You
Carrie,
have an incredible experience.
Sorry, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. So you are an ultra marathoner, but that identity or title does not do you justice. You've got a Guinness Book of World Records. You've won incredible races like the Badwater, the Death Valley, and you come from a background that most would consider unlikely for maybe the ultra marathon world. So that's my small take on things. Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of where you came from and how you got into ultra?
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me. It's great to connect with you today. Yeah, I would say I've had a pretty unlikely journey in my life. I was born and raised in Italy, in a small town on the Northwest coast. And, I grew up like all kids out there, fascinated with soccer and, hanging out with the family. And right after the studies, I actually started working in the family business in the floral industry. And thanks to that, eventually I decided to spend, I started working with international markets, and 2007 came around and I decided to spend some time across the pond, specifically in Miami, Florida, which at the time was the main port of entry for us. And, perhaps to improve the language and expand the business. And, at the time I was actually even looking into opening up a branch and doing something on my own in a way. But first week I landed in Florida, I very much by chance, I got scouted by a renowned modeling agent. And right out there on Ocean Drive, I was still looking for an, and one thing led to another. And that day I walked out of her office with a contract in hand that literally changed my life completely. I was 24 years old at the time, and again, coming from a small town in Italy, found myself in Miami, introduced to this whole new world. It felt like a dream, and that's how pretty much it all started. At that point, I started working down in Miami and started picking up momentum. So, I had the opportunity to travel quite a bit between, New York, Milan, and all those, Paris, London, all those big fashion spots. And life was good. Life was great, actually. Not only on a career level, financial level, but also on a personal level. Because again, you got introduced to this whole new industry, and I started riding that wave, and started working with the biggest names in the world, in the fashion industry. Started working with the biggest photographers and clients, and it was very rewarding. There was very rewarding, also in a sense of. You get introduced to that whole lifestyle. Everybody wants you. Everybody, you represent that image, right? So, clubs and restaurants, everybody wants you here. Everybody wants you there. Everything is handed out. And for a bit, for a chapter, or at least for a little portion of that time, felt like the king of the world. I was living that image of success that is portrayed in movies and TVs and all of that. As that, the status that you reach that certain status, you're making money, you're partying with the celebrities and the socialite. And so, you think like that's what it's all about. And it was fantastic for a period of time, until I just, I started getting, sucked up into it. And you also then realize the negative side. It's all fancy and glamorous until you don't kind of look at the backside of the coin. And the flip side was the detrimental lifestyle that came with it. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whatever it was. But that's fun up a certain point. Then you realize how shallow and empty that leaves you. And so I started going through a very deep, I would say, personal crisis. I don't want to necessarily say depression because everything was great. You know, at that point I had moved to New York. I decided to deepen my, my presence in the biggest market. And despite, the apartments I had here and there, the cars and partying still, and the money, that financial reward that I was getting, I started getting into a very, like, in a deep sense of dissatisfaction. I just couldn't find purpose or fulfillment behind everything that I was doing. Again, I was pursuing that image, but then realized that that wasn't the answer for me. And so I went through, a few episodes that eventually made me reassess my whole, or actually not necessarily reassess, but made me question my whole existence. I came to a very, very critical bottom point where I even contemplated, ending it all. I speak about it in my book that recently launched, Ultra. It was a cold spring night, 2009, and I just, came back from yet another party filled with celebrities and bottles and all of those things, and walked home to my apartment in Battery Park, and it was a very cathartic, let's say that, moment of my life, just because I came to really question myself, what I was doing, and if it was all worth it. And so, I sat outside the 15th floor of my apartment window, and I sat out there for a long time, thinking if it was, what was it all about? What am I doing with this life of mine? And that very moment, that, as at the crack of dawn, I came to the realization that it's never, nothing is ever all lost. We always have the opportunity to, if we're not content, if we're not happy in a certain moment in our lives, we can, at any moment, doesn't matter what age or circumstances, we can always climb out of that pit. We can always look up and see the light, and we can always reinvent ourselves. Nothing is set in stone, nothing is forever. So that realization, and also the love of my family, kind of brought me back into my senses and made me realize that all I needed to do was to pick myself up and change. And so change I did, or at least I looked for it. And, for a good portion of time, I started digging within to discover and find out what could have given me a new verve, a new perspective in life to climb out of that pit and find joy once again. And so, I very much retraced everything back to the roots. I was born and raised in Italy. I had a, great fortune to have a family that introduced me to, in a way, to nature, and appreciation for nature and the outdoors from a very young age. We lived by the Mediterranean Sea, but we had the Alps right behind. So we skied the Alps in the winter, we hiked the Dolomites in the summer. So I was very fortunate to be introduced to that, or at least feel that connection right from a very young age. And so all these things kind of gave me, again, a sense of like a breath of fresh air. I started, and at that moment, living in New York City, feeling caged in that concrete jungle, the desire to explore the outdoors and reconnect to nature and, find adventure, it kind of gave me excitement. So I started reading a bunch of things. I started watching documentaries of explorers and adventurers of all kinds, from high mountain climbers, ocean rowers, all type of stuff. It was all great, but nothing really spoke to me until.
So hold on.
Sorry.
On this, at this point, like I'm visualizing the scenario and, sensing the plethora of pleasures that you're experiencing, the significance around other people, the highs from the drugs, the highs from the money, the status, the new experiences, the recognition, all of these things that are coming. And then it's almost like this full circle of realizing that just the simplest things that you always had, the love of your family, the raw joy, the dogs in the background.
Yes, apologies.
Okay, I
It's
got
actually the dog wanting me to open the door for it to come in. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's the beauty of the live.
I love it. I love it.
There we go.
But it's all coming back in this way of simplicity of, it almost sounds like you never would have appreciated what you always had you not gone to that other extreme. And so one of the questions I have in when you're pursuing, when you're going back to nature, you're connecting with maybe adventures or the Alps or different situations, and you're not quite finding the right thing. At that point, are you still connected with the party buddies, the modeling friends, are you still in the world of modeling at that time as well?
Well, I had to,
You need money.
eventually I discovered in the Christmas time of 2010, eventually I discovered ultra running, and it was like a lighting bulb. I was like, it's like a moment of like, okay, this is it. I didn't know why. And, I never ran a marathon. I never really, I ran a little cross country track when I was like in middle school, early years of high school, like pretty much all of us did. But, I never been an actual runner. Actually, at the time I was a beefy gym guy, being in fit as a model. And for a period of time, I still had to play that game in the modeling world. And I still had to do what I needed to do to pay the bills. I had, a whole system set up. I was still traveling, doing all of that. But I was, in a way, I found out something that truly called me. And the more I was transitioning towards ultra running, because again, to me, it was such an incredible moment in my life that it was almost like a calling. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, I didn't know when, but my desire was to commit myself wholeheartedly to that craft. And I was committed to making my life, to making my career, to it's almost like, I was living a completely different life, and perhaps following the teachings of most of the motivational characters that we have in our society, and the American dream. You can do it if you want to. If you really dedicate yourself, you can achieve whatever you set out to do. I believed it, and I was like, I don't know how, but I'm gonna do it. And so
you already had the example of showing up in Miami and having everything fall on your lap. But then, how, if you've never run a marathon, you've never run an ultra, it seems mind-boggling to think that you've committed so deeply or find it as a calling when you don't even know what the struggle or the pain is.
Right. That didn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that's a great message that I think, the message that I like to share, and that transcends the discipline in itself, sport, is that whatever calls you, whatever passion, whatever desire you have. And we all have a deeper desire. When we go, I remember when, first day of school, elementary school, I remember the teachers telling us, asking us, what do you want to be when you grow up? And everybody wants to be an astronaut. He wants to be something spectacular. And then, the societal trend shrinks us down to you need to kind of put yourself into a box and fit in the status, the societal, whatever it is, your construct. There you go. Yeah. And so, we tend to put our dreams on the side because, we lack probably faith in ourselves. We stop, believing in ourselves. And so, we tend to be, to just feel comfortable in what is, the sense of security that a normal job, a normal career will give you. But that shrinks your souls down. Mm-hmm. That doesn't allow you to spread your wings and actually live the life that you are meant to live. Mm-hmm. And so to me, all of these things spoke personally, spoke directly. And I was like, you know what? I don't care that I've never been a runner. This is the life, the reason why I felt so connected to this is because that one book by Dean Karnazes called Ultra Marathon Man was so mind-blowing, mind-boggling. These feats of endurance, these adventures, like pushing you outside your comfort zone, pushing outside everything that you know to find a deeper connection and find your true potential. Like, it was so fascinating. But more than that, I very much connected to the author. He discovered ultra running at 30 years old.
Yeah.
I was 27 at the time. And, despite the fact that we came from two different careers, he was a successful businessman working for a Fortune 500. And on my end, I was a successful model. But, we came to the same conclusion. We achieved material success. We achieved that, dream of whatever, hitting a certain social status, and yet not finding fulfillment, not finding, contentment. And so that spoke to me completely, because again, he was able in a span of a short few years to reinvent himself completely. And so I said, you know what? If he did it, why can't I?
Yeah.
So his example paved the way for me to pretty much question everything that I was doing and commit myself to this nonsense, let's say. And fast forward 10 years later, we're here talking.
So I have to get this snapshot of your first race, because most people who have trained for a marathon never fully train for the full distance, let alone an ultra. And
Yeah.
I've done distance races, I've done various things, I've trained a number of people for whether it's marathons, ultras, other types of endurance things. A lot of them who are first timers, especially first timers, don't complete training of the full distance of the event.
Right.
Tell us about leading into your first race. It was Death Valley, wasn't it? It was the Badwater.
Well, no. The first race I did was actually the Keys 100 down in South Florida.
Okay, yes.
And what happened there, so and it's funny because, again, I started reading that book. I found out about ultra marathons at the end of 2010, right around the Christmas holidays. January 1st, bought my first pair of shoes. I started running laps in Central Park, committed I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to, I always in a way loved running, but it wasn't about running. It was about ultra. It was about going beyond the physical, going beyond running. And that's what
potential.
Finding out what we're truly capable of, and not accepting the limits that are given to us, but venturing into the unknown in a way to find out what we're truly capable of. And that's what fascinates me to this day. And so, when I started running back in 2011, I wasn't interested in running a half marathon or running a marathon. And I'm not talking down to any of those distances, because they're all absolutely respectable and fascinating. And they all, even a 5K is an outstanding challenge. So
is what you were inspired by.
And so, I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to see what it was all about. So I looked online. I found the keys down in Florida. And I was like, you know what? Let's pull the trigger. I signed up for my first race, which was a 100-miler. So I jumped in head first. In those four and a half months, I literally killed myself, because I started, I knew nothing about how to train.
Yeah, how to periodize.
For a marathon, let alone for ultra running.
Yeah.
So what I did,
how to recover, I don't know, just the little things.
I just went out and ran. So what I did, I started doing a lot of research online, because I knew nobody that did this type of thing. So I didn't have any access to people that I could talk about it. I could, draw some experience from. And so I started doing researches online, and I landed on several blogs at the time of these top athletes running, winning races and documenting their training.
And
And
their
my
bleeding
thought was,
nipples and their blisters and bleeding nipples and all those things.
yeah, no, that was just like, a side effect of it, but it didn't matter. So to me, the thought, the simple thought was, okay, if these guys are successful and this is how they train, all I have to do is train like they do and I'll be good too. Makes sense, right? The problem is you don't look at years to get to that point. So I literally ran myself into the ground. I started from basically, 10, 20 miles a week to up about 140 in a matter of 4 months.
Two things that come to mind: training age and beginner stupidity. Those are the two things.
That's, I was like, complete stupidity there. Yep. Nonsense. But
awesome.
If nobody tells you you cannot do it, it doesn't matter, you do it.
The best.
And so I did. I ran through injuries, I ran through setbacks, I ran through the cold of the New York winter to then toe the line in mid-May down in the tropics, and with a handheld in my hands and a short pair of short shorts and no shirt, and I was like, all right, let's run. So I toed the line with high hopes and great desire to do it, to understand what Dean was talking about. And I ran until I could run no more. And in mile 84, I passed out cold. I woke up in an ambulance with my family, which came from Italy to crew for me, crying, begging me to never do it again. And that's how it started.
Mickey, no, Mickey, no.
Please.
Don't do this to us and yourself.
Don't do it again. That's complete insanity. But, for whatever reason, that sparked even more that desire to do it more, to venture beyond that point and understand if I could actually do it. I licked my wounds. It took me a long time to kind of get back on my feet, because that first race was literally a death march. The one thing though that gave me somewhat of the lift in my spirit was the fact that when I passed out, I was about, just over a half marathon to go, and I was in the lead. And so, I was like, okay, if I get my knowledge right, if I explore more this whole thing, because, race made me understand that it's not just about running. You need to know more about nutrition, about hydration, about self-management, about the mental, all of these things. And, with that knowledge, with that understanding that I could be good at it, I started diving in even more. And eventually 6 months later, I towed the line to a 50 miler. I won that race. Month later, I towed the line to 100K. I won that race. And so, it was like, it was almost like feeding off of itself, that positivity. I was like, okay, the more I know, the more I dedicate, the better I'm getting. So why not go all in? And so that's what I did. In the following 2 years, basically, I drifted more and more away from modeling to become more and more of a runner. And in 2014, 2015, I actually signed my first contract, and I was able to make that switch.
That's incredible, first of all. And I can't even imagine the amount of training you've put in as well. What I'm curious about is, you've got this extreme on one end of this high flying lifestyle and these extreme physical and emotional and pleasurable experiences. And that can be addictive, because we've got this dopamine dump in our brain. It's like,
absolutely,
the next price tag, the next purchase, the next contract, the next thing. This is the extreme on the other end, but there's so many parallels in some ways. Just it's still an extreme. It's still kind of this top end of something that's so different. Do you think this is part of this want for the limit, like the limit of yourself or the limit of experience, or what do you think, I see some parallels there and some extreme differences. What do you think of it for yourself?
Well, I can tell you there are a lot of ultra runners that are recovering addicts, whether they're, alcohol or drugs, abuse, or whatever, because you get that dopamine reward, as you were saying. And so, switching it to ultra running kind of allowed them to take away that negative and make it into somewhat of a, you're working on yourself, you're working on your physical and your emotional, your mental. So it's somewhat of a positive, but it still is an addiction. And I get that. And that's pretty much how it started for me. And I don't want to say like it was necessarily like a switch of addictions, but at the beginning to me was somewhat of a positive/negative, because it was a way to get away. It was almost like I was running away from that, and it gave me an opportunity to pursue something else. But over the years, that became from, it changed direction. From, instead of running away from it, it started going towards it. It started accepting what it was. And, I don't do it necessarily for the, as a swapping addictions. Rather, I changed completely my, my perspective towards it. It's right now, I don't get out there because I need to, to feel, swamped with adrenaline, endorphins, all of those pleasurable things. But it's just become a way for me to pursue. It's a different pursuit. It's a pursuit of self growth. It's a pursuit of finding purpose. It's a pursuit of fulfillment. And so that to me changed the record completely. It changed the direction. It's no longer a negative thread. It's an empowering journey of self-growth, of self-development. And that is absolutely addictive in a different way.
Yeah.
But it's not a negative addiction. It's a positive addiction that allows me to, in a way, get up every morning with the understanding that everything I'm doing is to better myself, to become the better version of myself every single day. So there is purpose behind it. It's not just getting out because I need to find that, to satisfy my physical self. It's a higher calling, in my opinion, at this point.
It sounds like there's a spiritual exploration in it. And it also sounds too like, I've heard a definition of addiction as the narrowing of what someone can find any sort of pleasure from. It just narrows and narrows and narrows as to what someone can find pleasure from. But this sounds more like a broadening of that and more of an exploration of what's possible in your own experience.
That's absolutely right.
If on that same thread, if ultra was taken away from you, what would you feel, or what would that be like for you? Someone just boom, gone.
Well, that's I would say that's a really good question.
In COVID, maybe that was the reality a year ago. Ultra's gone. No longer because of COVID.
And I very much, I love the question. It's a very challenging question. And I relate to that because exactly last year, all our securities, all our sense of control fell apart. And, with no races, no things ahead, it was very challenging at the beginning to kind of reset and reassess the situation, to kind of find because, you have to find the right motivation, what inspires you, the why you're doing what you're doing. Because, when the going gets tough, you have to have that anchor. And that relates, that transcends the sport, and that can relate to anybody, relationships, careers, businesses, whatever. So you have to have a strong why. And, if your why is just racing because you get that addiction from it, that's short-lived, in my opinion. So to me, it was very much another journey within to kind of retrace it back to the roots and not doing what I'm doing because I need to set records or win races, but doing what I'm doing because that's just who I am, and that's what gives me purpose every single day. That's what gives me joy. Like I find contentment in the simple act of getting out there and connecting with myself, running and connecting it to nature, with nature, exploring the trails and the mountains around me. So not doing it because I need to get a reward after it or because I need to achieve something, but doing it because that's what I enjoy to do. As simple as that.
Yeah. And
You know,
there's such a difference between some of the things you've said: joy, contentment, fulfillment, experience, connection to nature, which, if people
yeah, you can relate to, yeah.
I kind of get that. But if for those who are listening, there's lake, trees, and sky in my background. And if you can hear the waves, then that gives you an idea of where I am with nature. But so those joy, that connection, that deep fulfillment, that's a very different experience of life than going for the next goal without experiencing what's happening along the way, without fully embracing all of the failures and the learnings and the experiences, instead of thinking that the achievement is the only thing there is. It's so empty compared to that.
It
Going
is.
for what's possible just because it's possible, experiencing the world and something different and challenging just because you can, and
Yep.
really embracing all of it.
Yep. That very much resonates with me, and the journey that I've had to discover these things. We are told that we need to do certain things or achieve certain things to feel happy, to find purpose, and that's pretty much one of the wake-up calls that kind of allow me to make this transition. Was back then, when I was still modeling, I had the opportunity to not just work with some of the biggest names in the industry and work at the highest level, but I also had the opportunity to connect with let's say big characters out there, like big players, like what we call celebrities, socialites, whatever, people that have immense amount of wealth. And what I realized there, it's that despite what we're told, because we're always told that you need to find that material reward, satisfaction, you get these nice things and you should be happy and all of that. But what I realized in those moments is that those were some of the most miserable people I've ever met in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were doing, they had everything they wanted. They had everything that most people would dream of, but they weren't living a life worth living in a way. Mm-hmm. They weren't living a life that would give them a sense of fulfillment and purpose. I keep on hitting those two words because that's what truly changed my life. If you don't have a drive, if you don't have a purpose in your life, you can have you can sleep in a bed of gold, but you're going to wake up every morning wondering, what the heck are you doing here?
There's two things that you said that I think really point to what's missing when someone has it all, but they feel so empty. And it's the contentment, or the allowing that contentment, and the relationships, the loving relationships in their life.
Yeah.
And if those two things, if not being able to just be, and being able to have,
you hit the target right there. Just be, and be content with yourself and who it's you said you really hit all the right spots, even earlier when you were saying it's very much like a spiritual journey. And and when you talk about spiritual journey, you will recognize the switch in direction. Everything we do in the societal, not pattern, societal pattern. What did you say? Construct. From the moment we go to school, when we're raised, we always tend to put everything outside of us. Everything is about, getting good grades so that you can get a reward, then getting a good career so you can get good money, so you can buy things that eventually, the whole pattern is wrong. The whole pattern is wrong right at the basis of it. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do these things, because of course it would be naive that money, it doesn't serve us, well in life, and having nice things is not a good thing. Far from that. But it's the premise of it. It's the base of it that is wrong. Because ultimately, if you're able to switch that direction and do the things that you do because that's who you are, and that what drives you, and that's where you draw purpose again, where you find purpose within yourself, you'll do these things even better, and you'll pursue the things that you need to pursue even harder, with more desire, with more momentum, with more drive. And you don't need to pursue the financial success, because once you fulfill yourself and actualize yourself, those things will chase you automatically.
And it's bonus, because you already have everything that you really,
exactly.
It's just the icing on the cake. And there's, it's that saying that if you love what you do, you're never working a day in your life, because you're living your best life already. And that's really what I'm trying to create with the things that I pursue, but also with how I coach others. So in this, to shift gears just a little bit in terms of I happen to also have a background in physiology and strength and conditioning and biomechanics and all these other things, although those are the details, really. But you've accomplished something that I think is truly phenomenal. It may sound impressive, but if it's a coach or a scientist, to really understand that you've won a race that is the Yukon Ultra, that's minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So in Celsius, probably around minus 20-ish. And then also the Death Valley, the Badwater 135. I imagine that's 135 miles.
135 miles at 130 degrees, which is about 54 degrees Celsius.
Like it is mind-boggling, not only the distances, but the distances in those conditions take another level of not only physical training, but it's also the mental toughness, the resilience, the determination. So if you could comment on those two things, like those extremes are they're phenomenal. They're really phenomenal. And I think that's one of your records. Is one of your records the only person to win a hottest and coldest?
Hottest and coldest. So
I mean, that's incredible. I really want to acknowledge you for that, because it takes something. But I want to emphasize too that there's the physical side of things. It really takes something physically, and it really takes something within this mental, this mind realm, not just brain forcing, but this mind realm. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it's a whole nother world.
Absolutely. When I first started this, my journey into ultra running, the search for the next big challenge has always been, I think most of ultra runners can relate to that. There's always okay, you run 100 miles. Okay, what can you do next? What's bigger than that? What can put me? And it's not, again, to me, it's never been about, bragging rights. It's always been about personal exploration and the fest. Exactly. Yeah. Putting myself out there, to find out what I'm capable of, because, we grew up in a way that we were always told what is possible to do. Especially like I come from, Italy with a strong Greek influence. I was raised with that, the story of Phidippides running a marathon and then dying. And then, for the longest time, we always assumed that the marathon was the staple for human endurance, beyond which the body simply couldn't go. And, when I first did my nose in ultra running, I started finding out about these people running 2, 4, 8 marathons in a row, nonstop, and they're perfectly healthy. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so here's like redefining it's almost like opening up the horizons to what's possible. And so, after a few years of experience and races here and there, I came across this, the Yukon Arctic Ultra. And, up there in the middle of the Northern Territory in Canada, that fascination for the Jack London's book, the outposts of the, golden exploration era and all of that. And, finding out that beyond, beside the dog sled race, there is this foot race. And so I'm like, okay. And so I started doing more research and I was like, okay, this looks like it's going to push my, my limits way further, or at least put me way outside of my comfort zone. Because again, I never ran in that type of environment. And so I signed up right away. And as soon as I signed up, I was like, you know what? I don't think anybody has ever done both, especially the same year. So in basically 6 months' time, I ran the Yukon 100 miles in the Yukon territory in the middle of the winter. As you said, temperatures dropping to 40 below. And fast forward, less than 5 months later, I told the line of bad water where temperatures reach about 130 degrees. That first year, of course, I had a great opportunity, I would say I was lucky enough to win the Yukon. And when I told the line of bad water, I was like, I went in with high hopes, but then reality set in. A lot of health issues came around and I suffered quite a bit. I went through a lot of like health issues that, could have been debilitating, but I was so determined to bring it to an end that I literally crawled through Death Valley. I finished the race. So I brought home the big challenge I set out to do, but I wasn't satisfied. I finished 25th position in a time that was way slower than I thought I could have done. And so, it took me a little time to kind of get back on my feet. In 2018, I towed the line again at Badwater, and in a way or another, everything went pretty well, and I brought home the win that year. So, that year, 2016, I was able to finish both races, and in a span of 2 years, I was able to win both the coldest and the hottest.
What I don't want to gloss over to people who don't really understand ultra as much. I know that we've interviewed someone who is a former national team volleyball player who's run the Leadville 100. So he doesn't necessarily have the physique for as most ultra runners might, but he didn't finish at his first Leadville, and then he did the second one, finished it the following year.
Wow.
So, but in taking a look at this, what are some of the things that you legitimately come up against from health, from injuries? What would be your top concerns that have come up for you in maybe that one Badwater race, or overall, what do you always have to be careful of in your training and your racing?
Right. Well, I can tell you, since we're talking about the two extremes, when I ran the Yukon, the last, let's say 2, 3, 4 hours, I felt like I was running underwater because my cornea was frozen. And, I was running through the night. I mean, it's, up there in the winter, it's about 18 hours of darkness and about 4 or 5 hours of dim light. So, throughout the whole stretch in the dark, it was so cold that I couldn't keep my mask on, because it was with the fact that I was running, I was also kind of sweating a little bit, although I was trying to thermoregulate with the zippers and, taking on and off layers and stuff. But I had to take my mask off because the little layer of sweat was freezing on my face and it was burning. So I decided to take it off without realizing that it was way worse, because eventually it started freezing my cornea. And I couldn't even, towards the end, I couldn't even kind of see the finish line. And I started running towards the yells of my father, which actually came from Italy to crew for me. And he was ecstatic when he saw the light. He started yelling, and I followed the screams, and eventually got there. And the running through these temperatures and breathing, I burned my trachea, I burned my stomach. So for like 2-3 months afterwards, it was a very debilitating situation, because I couldn't eat properly. I couldn't drink anything hot or cold. It was very challenging. It was my first experience in those conditions, so I definitely paid a toll, paid a price for that. And now with a little more understanding, I could make a few adjustments to suffer a little less. But that's the journey that I signed up for, and I brought home a great deal of understanding of how resilient we are. If you set your mind to something, it doesn't matter, and nothing matters. There's a great saying: if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So
The mind overcomes all the
mind can overcome anything, and that's pretty much the beauty of these type of challenges. They allow you to tap into a greater, like, into your higher self. We always talk about, of course, you got to have a fit body to achieve this type of things. You have to develop a strong mind, but in my opinion, the driving force is always is something deeper or higher. Heart, soul, spirit, whatever we want to call it. And if your soul, if your heart is in it, nothing can stop you. That is a great servant, but a terrible master. So you can only rely on the mind up to a certain point. You can use it to achieve whatever you want, but you cannot allow it to make decisions, because when they're going to get stuff, it's always going to find the easy way out. So the mind is always on a path of resistance, while the heart, in a way, is in a state of flow. So you got to tap into the higher self, into the state of flow, to make it through whatever comes. Because the spiritual journey that I undertook in these years of exploration allow me to understand that the outside doesn't matter. The conditions outside don't matter if your inside is stable, is solid, is ground, is whole. You need to be fully connected within yourself, and everything that goes on outside is just it's just noise. And the same thing happens with the heat. In 2016, when I crawled through that valley, I started, I suffered severe dehydration. I started, it's not pretty to say, but I started peeing blood. My kidneys were shutting down. I was passing out after, every mile or two. But I was so attached to it. I was so driven on a deeper level that it didn't matter. It didn't matter how I placed. It didn't matter the time. It did, you strip down of everything. And that's why, I call these journeys, these races, spiritual journeys, because they truly allow you to tap into that in a different realm, a different experience of life.
And more, with what you're describing, more vulnerable on all levels. It sounds like just so vulnerable. You also mentioned the state of flow. Do you find now that do you notice the state of flow in showing up in other areas of life now that you've practiced it so much in your sport or your craft?
Absolutely. It's something that, those are lessons that transcend the discipline. I also, I've been studying yoga and meditation and mindfulness in India, studying internationally in Rishikesh. And that was just about 2018. So it was relatively recently. And it was outstanding to me to see the similarities. I started with yogis that, have been studying and practicing this 5, 6, 7,000 years old craft up there in the Himalayas. And the fact that, yoga means union, the union of the body, the mind, and the soul. So there is a deeper connection. And I was truly mesmerized and amazed to see the similarities of what I discover through my personal journey in ultra running to the teachings that these Vedic people have been developed over thousands of years through asana, through yoga. So, when we talk about yoga in our Western world, we think about the poses. No, those are just asanas. That's just like one little part of it. Yoga is a huge, giant practice that brings you from, pranayama, shatkarma practices, and, a bunch of things. Now, we're not going to get into that because it's not really the topic, but it's the understanding that breaking through the physical barriers, you can tap into the mind. But then you have to break the mind too. The mind, we always stress in the Western world, we always stress the power of the mind. And that's right up until a certain point. But if you truly want to tap into something even greater, you have to break the mind down to tap into the higher self, to tap into the heart, mind, spirit, soul, whatever we want to call it. Because only when you achieve that, you connect to I keep on saying something higher. Everything. It's a higher energy. It's a higher self. And once you achieve that, you're in a state, you find that we are infinite in many ways. And that's what I strive to do when I get into this type of races. You detach, you break the physical barriers, but then you have to detach from the mind as well. Because as I said before, the mind is always on a path of resistance. So you can be, mind strong, and you can push and push and push, but it's always going to be a push. Once you break the mind and you tap into that higher ground, you're no longer in a path of resistance, you're in a path of flow. And once you're into that, you can go on forever. Nothing can stop you because you're unbothered. You're unattached. So you no longer feel, pain is always going to be there because it's going to be a necessary part of your journey. But a great Buddhist saying that is fitting to this, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Mm-hmm. So once you break the mind, there's no more suffering. You just accept pain for what it is, and you're unbothered, you are unattached, you are unbounded. And that's when you truly feel free and set yourself for, to achieve whatever you set out to do.
That's incredible. I think of, there's a definition of suffering that I love, which is that suffering is your pain about your pain.
That's exactly right. It's something that a mind creates. You suffer. Exactly. It's your interpretation of pain.
Yeah,
that's it.
And then at the same time, what you've described in going through the physical into the mind, and then beyond the barrier of the mind and into a higher space, or transcending that.
Yeah.
Experiencing something like that really emphasizes how insignificant our physical experience of the world is. Our physical experience of the world is just, it's just a thing, and that's not really what.
It's a very tiny, it's a speck. Yeah. It's a little speck.
We think that's everything, but the reality is it's next to nothing. And
that's what I think the social construct is taking, is lowering our understanding of what we can do or what we're capable of, because it keeps everything to the physical ground, to the physical realm. So not allowing ourselves to tap into these higher grounds, in many ways it's minimizing our experience. It's not allowing us to experience life and our potential to the utmost.
I love this. I love this experience of utilizing what's available to us physically, utilizing what's available to us within our natural environment, connecting with our natural environment to really understand, and maybe never even fully understanding, but at least have a sniff at a bigger perspective or a bigger experience. Right now, is there anything that's either holding you back, or that you're afraid of, or you're struggling with right now? What's happening in your world right now with all that you've experienced and learned so far?
Well, I think last year and this year, because we're still in the rough seas in many ways, I think allowed us to understand that we're not in control. And so that's already kind of a step forward in many ways to kind of, reassess our situations as a whole, as a humanity. And so to me, I got to tell you, it's been a journey of highs and lows just like ultra running, just like life, we've been going through so many moments of despair, and then moments where we felt like we're going to come up. So, it's definitely been a rough patch for me at the beginning. As I said before, I'm a type of person that likes to kind of plan things ahead. I like to live in the moment, but I like to plan ahead, because at least I have a direction. And so I came to a point where I'm like, okay, these things, races are getting canceled. I had expedition planned. I had, all these things that, I always plan about a year in advance, at least, if not more. So, it made me face reality and the fact that I am not in control of any of that. So bringing the focus within and not stressing too much about the outside world allow me to find balance again. And I'm not saying that, I have all the answers and then I'm like, everything is good, but I strive to work on myself and develop myself in a way that whatever comes, I'm okay with it. Because again, as I said before, if your inner self is, I often relate to a body of water. We're like, let's say a lake, just like your lake in there. You can throw all the rocks in there that you want that creates these waves and they disrupt your peace. But if your deeper self is quiet and calm, you can absorb those ripples and, and not necessarily feel depressed or distress or, or discontent. Because a lot of times, we always put our expectations towards the outside world. And when that's out of our control, then we feel we're lost. Yeah. So this is the one teaching, the one lessons that I carry with me, not stressing too much about the outside influences and working on myself every single day. It's never mastered. It's a craft that needs to be refreshed and reestablished every single day, every single week, every single season, every single year. It's a constant work. It's a constant labor, but it's a labor of love in my opinion. Because once you come from, once you are content within, once you are, when you come from a point of love and gratitude for where you are, what you have in your life, the people that are around you, then you open up to a kind of version of yourself. And in many ways, you can also influence those around you for the best. And that's where I'm at right now.
That's beautiful. And it's also the realization that no matter how far anyone has grown or even more of a spiritual practice or enlightenment or experiences in life, there's still going to be something that comes up at some point. That's just part of it. That's just part of, and we can't even never really say that it wasn't supposed to happen, because it did. Yep. So,
I think in our experiences, we always try to, we focus on what we don't want. So we push away the things that, we don't like, the things that are put us in discomfort, the things that, but just simply accepting what it is for what it is, you're just opening up to a much more calm, grounded, and I would say content self. Because, let's face it, this is life. And, we have one opportunity to make it memorable and make it exciting for ourselves. So focusing on the negatives just limits ourselves and kind of freezes ourselves on our steps and doesn't allow us to focus on the positive and what is actually, changing our life for the best. So, it's always in a way, that's why I say it's a constant work. Every single day you need to kind of reassess these things and to kind of refresh in the mind and the spirit to what it is that feeds your soul. Because ultimately that's the only true riches, of our existence. It's us, it's who we are. And in my opinion, how we can contribute. And that's what I find fulfillment. That's what I find the purpose in what I do. It's contributing in a way that it's something greater than myself. It's not about the financial return or the getting praise for achieving whatever we achieve, but it's about understanding how we can give more to others and pave the road for something more, something greater for ourselves as a whole, as a species. I realized in my personal journey, my personal story, I realized how powerful inspiration is, and because not only changed my life, a decade ago, but it truly saved it. And so now being in this position where I can hopefully inspire others to take on a new challenge, push beyond themselves, believe that they can do it, doesn't no matter the circumstances or whatever they are in this moment in their lives, is the most rewarding feeling that I can get. And that's what fires me up every day to pursue myself. So it's almost like it's a self-propelling energy powering itself up. And I feel myself I feel beyond privilege and honor to be in this position now.
It's very powerful, and you're truly demonstrating what is possible. And on more of a superficial note, just for the fun curiosity of our listeners, what would you say would be a favorite meal for heading into training or post workout? Do you have a favorite meal? And so favorite meal, favorite music, favorite training. Those are some fun questions we like to ask.
All right. Well, I am very much plant-based, but before a race, I love sushi. That's my go-to. The night before a race, I go sushi, especially like salmon. It has good fats, you get some good carbs from rice, and a very tiny amount of veggies in there. So try not to put too much fibers in the body, but that's it also satisfied my taste buds. Yeah. So I will go with sushi. Favorite music, that's a very tough question, because if I share my playlist with you, you'll be very surprised. I have anything and everything. I have everything from Pavarotti to opera to Lil Wayne to hard rock to 80s rock to hip hop to to techno, dance, everything.
I love it.
Easiest. I mean, I even had Katy Perry in there, so that's just something.
Love it.
Love it. And favorite training, when it comes to training, I realize how important it is to find joy in training. I'm a type of person that doesn't necessarily stick too much to, I have a routine that I plan ahead of time, because I know, now that I understand periodization, now that I understand this thing, but I do not stress too much about pace. I don't stress about, I might do some speed work here and there, but most often it's not even by the watch, it's by songs.
Yeah.
So, like I do things that, and I'm not saying that, that necessarily works for everybody, but it works for me. I don't like to go on a track and be, in a way, I don't like the word, but it's how it is, enslaved to the watch.
Yep.
I just because I realized that's not sustainable in the long run. Mm-hmm. At least for me, again, every time I put too much stress, too much effort, I turn to burnout. Mm-hmm. So what I realized nowadays, or at least in the past few years, is when I go out, I know I need to do something specific. I know what I have to do, but I try to turn it in a way that I can have fun with it. And then, if you ask me what my favorite my favorite training is probably the long runs on the weekend. And most often are out on the trails, out in the big mountains. I get up there, I don't care about the pace. I get up, my goal is to experience what I'm doing and spend time on my feet. And if one day I feel great and I'm dropping fast miles, perfect. The next week I'm not feeling it, and I'm just walking it or hiking it, and hiking it up and running it down or whatever it is, I take that home as well as a productive day. So my recommendation to any and all runners is find joy in what you're doing.
Nice.
Yeah, at any level.
I love that, because in what you've just given our listeners an example of is action that's aligning with the entire message that you've just described. And if you had just said, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that, then it doesn't align with all of the things that you've said in terms of how you're connected with your body, your mind, your environment, your sense of now, all of those things. So to wrap this up, one last real question here.
Yes.
And that is, if you think back to your younger self, or you think of young people now going through COVID, inspiration is something that's so important to you. What would be a message or some words of wisdom that you'd like to give to maybe your younger self, or other people, young people now who might use a little motivation or inspiration? Is there a message that you have?
Well, there could be like a lot of messages, especially for all the things that we are, that we've been talking about. But there are, I would start, I always found as used as it's been, and for whatever cheesy it could sound, but I really resonated with that phrase by Steve Jobs, stay hungry, stay foolish. And the message that I can get out there, kind of spinning off of that, is that message always reminded me how important it is to, in a way, never feel arrived, never feel like, that you are there, because you never will. When we talk about physical preparation, you're never going to achieve that 100% perfect fitness, and you're never going to be able to sustain it. If you're talking about on a mental level, you're going to achieve mental fortitude, but eventually there are going to come times that's going to crumble. If you talk on a spiritual level, you hear people nowadays saying they're woke, and I'm like, well, just because you say you're woke shows that you are completely asleep. Because you can be on a path to awakening, but not even the most accomplished or actually spiritually sound guru is never woke. So it's about understanding that you can always develop yourself more. You can always go further. And so this also means that you can continue, especially in a moment of trial like these ones that you're saying through COVID and the uncertainties that we're facing in our societies nowadays. It's about continuing to try and retry, even when everything around us is, tells us that it's not possible. Mm-hmm. So, I'm probably here. The greatest message that I would like to share is about encouraging everyone that is listening to venture into the unknown, mm-hmm. and to embrace it, because we're always going to come to a point where we cannot control what's going on. It's always good to stay in our pond, in our castle, let's say in the safety of our castle, and control the things that we know we can control. But if one thing that I learned is that there's growth only happens when you start venturing outside, venturing into the unknown, start threading in uncharted water, because that's when you discover your strength, your resilience, and your ability to make it through the tough moments. It's all about, I think life, it's all about risk and failure, because you can only learn from those and develop yourself to a higher higher understanding of what you're capable of. So, we are, I think from the moment we grow up, we all have, as we said before, we have great desires, we have great hopes, and then life puts us in a box and it makes us kind of re-question our choices and the things that we wanted to do. And that step alone makes us feel not worthy, makes our faith kind of fade. And again, we all have ambitions, and too often we're afraid to take risks. We're afraid not to be good enough, not to be strong enough, not to be smart enough. we, in a way, we feel trapped by all these uncertainties, by these, this situation that makes us feel unworthy, and the fear of failure and all of these things. So in every step that you're taking outside of your comfort zone, we discover our strength, our perseverance, and our abilities to grow and achieve those dreams. So in whatever direction we're going to go, again, my direction has been towards an athletic endeavor and exploration, ultra running, endurance sports, but whatever it is you're calling, whether it is, business careers, whichever things you want to do in life, just don't be afraid to fail, because that's just an inevitable part of your journey to success. And just enjoy the ride. That's as simple as that.
That's very powerful, very beautiful. Where can people find your book? You've got a book that's out, and what platforms do you hang out on so people can look for you?
Yes, I'm pretty much, you can find me on pretty much all social media platforms, but I'm very much more active on Instagram. And you can find me at Mickey, M-I-C-K-Y, last name Graglia, Graglia, or on my website, michelegraglia.com.
Beautiful. And then your book?
Yes, the book launched the end of June, and it's been an incredible journey already this past couple of months. It's called Ultra, Top Model to Top Ultra Runner, which pretty much goes through this life-changing transition of lifestyle even. And it's available. You can find it on my website or just Amazon. You can find all the, paperbacks, hardcovers, the ebook, and the audiobook is about to be released probably by the end of the summer.
But hopefully people will get it from your website, because that'll be the best place to get it. Website.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I am so grateful to have this experience with you. This has been very powerful. Thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences and wisdom with our audience. And I can't wait to hear more about your endeavors.
Carrie, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.